Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hi, this is Ivy Slater. Welcome to today's episode of Her Success Story. Today, I have a guest. Her name's Rachel Beider. She's an entrepreneur, a solo practitioner turned seven-figure massage business owner, a business consultant, and a best-selling author of Press Here, Massage for Beginners. She's also a tech investor and sits on several advisory boards. Rachel really doesn't spend a lot of downtime in her life, yet she somehow managed to have an adorable little baby in this past year or less. Her work has been featured in Oprah's Magazine, Refinery 29, and the Wall Street Journal. Most importantly, Rachel is incredibly interesting, a woman with a great insight, and a woman who consistently sees opportunity. And one of the things that had me really excited to bring Rachel on today was her ability to see opportunity and insight even during challenging times. So Rachel, thank you and welcome to Her Success Story.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm such a big fan of your work.
So tell me, how did this all get started? We don't just turn everything around in a day, and we don't just all of a sudden open a business and then get involved in 10 other things at once. How did this get started for you in this journey?
Sure. So for me, I always felt like when I was working for other people, I started as a massage therapist. And when I was working at spas or for a chiropractor, I just felt like I was often a bystander in my own career. I didn't feel impactful. I didn't feel like I had a voice. And I just felt like I didn't have a lot of control over the way that I was spending my time. And I often felt exploited by employers. It's not to say that I didn't have some wonderful bosses along the way, but I feel like I didn't like that I didn't have control over my time. And, it felt like a very insecure job market. This was 2008 when I started, and I
2008 was an insecure job market. It didn't feel like it. It was.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely right. And I wanted to have more control over knowing that I would have income and knowing that I would have, just control with my time and my schedule and things like that.
I'm just going to say there's a lot of people who would like to take back control. There's a lot of people who have I wish I could change this. And then there's the select few, to be all honesty, who go out and do that. So where did the impetus, where did the, guts, for lack of a word, the vision, how did you actually then have the emotions and then go to move to get started?
I think you hear from a lot of people about how passionate they are about what they do. And it's not to say that I'm not. I'm extremely passionate about what I do. But I didn't start out running from this place of super excitement. I actually started because I was miserable and very unhappy. And I feel like the impetus for my change was just frustration. And I kind of had enough. I hit that tipping point where I was like, I'm not going to tolerate this anymore. I'm not going to put up with poor behavior from my workplace and not making enough money. And I just felt like I hit this point where I had just sort of had enough of it. And I will say also, for me, I think anxiety is sort of a superpower because I get so anxious about, wanting things to be done a certain way and wanting things to be, to be in control of my life. And so I feel like I was moving from a place of anxiety more than anything.
So, just share, the short version of how did you actually then get started? Because I know there's a lot of insight in the book, when you say press here, massage for beginners. Where was your first moves?
Sure. So when I was working at the spa, I realized, I really wanted to start a private practice, but I just didn't have the money for it. I didn't have, a space to use. And I was thinking about how do we make the impossible possible? How do we work with a situation, even though, how do we make this figure outable, as Marie Forleo would say? And so I was thinking about at first taking my massage table to people's homes, but this thing is about a third of my body weight, and bringing it on the subway was just not going to work for me as a mobile therapist. I tried for a while to see clients out of my own apartment, which is a fifth floor walk up at the time. And I was living with roommates and it often smelled like yesterday's dinner. So it just wasn't really the appropriate space. And finally, I was like, you know what? I just need to be in a professional space. But since I don't have money to pay for it, I wonder if they'd trade me for time. And I specifically looked for, there's a physical therapy office in our neighborhood. And I asked them, would you be willing for me to work on your patients for free 2 days a week? I will trade you. In exchange, let me use this space when you're not using it. And they kind of looked at me funny and they were like, who is this 24-year-old precocious person? But they let me do it. And so right off the bat, I had maybe 10 clients who were really just friends of mine, if I'm honest. And by the end of this summer, about 3.5 months later, I had 110 clients. And that's how I got started.
And then, then the question is, okay, great. So you had this idea and you actually took action. It's brilliant because it's, startup capital is very minimal then, right? Everybody always worries about starting a business. And, one of the things you do is in help other people's invest and guide people. And so often people get stuck with, oh, I can't do this because I don't have capital. So you navigated a way around that. Mm-hmm. How do you start scaling? What was your moves? And, there's always many different ways to scale, but your story, I happen to love because it's smart. It's innovative because it's simple.
Yeah.
And doable.
I think for me, I quickly realized in terms of spending time to try to get new clients, it's very hard to get one client at a time. But if you find one person who can refer you a ton of clients, life just opens up in this easier way. So I specifically sought out individuals who see a volume of their own private clients, like personal trainers, hairdressers, chiropractors, anyone who's sort of in an adjunct field. And that year I traded a ton of massage for haircuts. My highlights were amazing. I traded massage for personal training. And what's great too about personal trainers is their clients are sore and they can afford training, which means they can afford massage. So it's this like perfect crossover.
It's a beautiful fit.
Yeah. And what I realized very quickly is if I can just get a handful of these particular people who are influential with their own clients, then that would be just an amazing immediate source of referrals for me.
So then, where have you taken you've touched on various things in your career and it's, where did you take it to start doing consulting and the momentum to writing a book and then, the whole idea of business consulting for other massage therapists? Like how did this spark that next phase of development?
Yeah, along the way, as I was growing my massage business, I had a lot of actually peers from school, classmates from school, who were like, "How the heck are you doing this?" And I would just sit down for coffee and chat with them about, what I was doing differently, how the internet is your storefront, and how important it is to have a website. And back in 2008, things were just starting to emerge with how wonderful the internet is, and now we have all kinds of lovely things like Google Business. But at the time, it was sort of a new frontier for a small business to have a website, and so it was very important. I was trying to convince all of my classmates and friends, and eventually that led to referrals of other people. And I realized I needed to put a boundary around my time and start charging for my time. So the consulting practice really sprang from a desire to help people in a different kind of way because I made so many mistakes along the way and did so much crying. And I realized I could help people to do this in a way that was good for them because they've sort of seen my mistakes and could prevent that from happening to them.
Well, I love it because it's coming from a true place of service. It's coming from, well, I made all these mistakes and I did all these things that were wins and loses, and I'll always say mistakes are not mistakes. They're truly learning curves. And we learn so much in the journey of business ownership. I don't even call it entrepreneurship sometimes because entrepreneurship sometimes is like thinking when it's smaller in the early days, and then you become this business owner, and then you become, the master's degree of business owner or something like that. That it's actually helping others so they can navigate things more smoothly. And I feel with you because, back in the early days of Slater Success, people would be like, hey, can I tap your brain? I know you've owned a business for many, many years. I'd love to tap your brain on thinking I'm doing something, or I've been doing it. I'd love to, can I just get your insight on this? And you have way too many cups of coffee or tea.
Yeah, that's so true. It's so true. I think it's important to put a boundary. Boundaries are actually, I think, one of the foundations of why the business worked out as well. I see so many people in all kinds of industries who are not charging their value, who are not, putting boundaries around their time and charging for missed appointments, or, they have all of these places where they're tolerating really bad treatment. And I feel like you really get what you tolerate. And it's really important. I always think about like these two sort of life-changing questions for self-accountability. The first is, what are you tolerating? And the second is, what are you avoiding? And when you think about like, what are you tolerating from yourself? Like I said, I was going to work out and I didn't do it. Or what are you tolerating from your clients or from your team or from your career? I feel like I try to do the self-accountability check-in at least once a month, where I just write down all the things I'm tolerating, because that really sneaks up on you and it kind of creeps in as sometimes eventually leads to resentment. So I think it's important to get on top of it.
That is a golden piece of advice. Listeners, if you take nothing else away, start your list today of what are you tolerating. And because you're right, when we do look at what we're tolerating, it ends up being a list of what's holding us back.
Yeah, absolutely. And same thing too is like, what are you avoiding or what are you afraid of? And I think the things that you're avoiding are usually the things that you need to address the most. And it's not just true in business. I think it's true personally too.
So so you said you started this when you were 24, living in a fifth floor walk-up with roommates. And, many of us can remember back in the day, or I remember my daughter back in the day. So how did you transform that into, having at your height, 5 locations? Am I right?
Yeah,
four locations, married, child, everything else. Like, how did this transform?
So for me, I remember opening the second location and hitting a tipping point where I was doing everything. So I was, still doing the hiring, all the massage therapists, all the front desk, I was training everyone, I was doing the bookkeeping, I was keeping on track of, the laundry going in and out and the cleaning going in and out. And I had delegated the laundry and cleaning. So that was like one thing I had delegated, but I was really doing pretty much everything else. And I had massage therapists at that point, but I realized I was just feeling like I was failing all the time because I was spread way too thin and I was starting to burn out. And I reached this tipping point where I was like, you know what? I need more help. I can't do this alone. I need to start to learn to delegate because I am feeling overwhelmed. And I just didn't even know where to start. So I hired a couple of business coaches, because of course I hired more than one, because that's just how my brain works. One was very strategy oriented with good with numbers, and another was very like 30,000 foot view, big picture
Nice.
thinking. And
Yep.
I got myself into a program. At the time it was called MBA on sneakers. Now it's called Future Women X. But basically they paired us up with a woman who was of the C-suite. So like a CFO or COO, CEO. And that partner that they paired us up with just had our back for a whole solid week while we were out in the world asking questions and taking meetings and doing other things that they had set up for us. And what I quickly realized, I noticed right away, oh, I need an operations person. If this were like a real funded company with VC, what are all of the various positions that would exist? And before I even bring on an ops person, I need to clean up the back of my house and start looking at the people I already work with who I can delegate more to, looking at virtual assistants who I can delegate some things there to, and basically just take about 70% of what was on my plate off. And I try to do that every year for my whole team. So whatever we're working on, 70% of it should be off our plate for the next year and passed down to the next in line, so that we're always growing, we're always learning, and we have more time to do things. But yeah, I reached that tipping point and I feel like, I could have gone under at that point. Like the business was doing well, but I was not doing well. I started taking Lexapro. I was like full of anxiety. I was crying a lot. I was just like going crazy trying to do everything and feeling so bad all the time. And finally, when I slowed down and I asked for help and started delegating, it just opened up a whole world of possibilities.
And I think, there's another item down, or slowing down and asking for help. It stops us so often. And I remember back in the day in growing Slater's success of when I reached my, and I'll say my brick wall that I just realized, and I was going a mile a minute and running, but the wall wasn't moving and it becomes exhausting.
Yeah.
And, to start navigating. And one of the scariest hires I did was hiring somebody to get me, which was an ops person.
Yep.
To start me. And she goes, okay, the first thing we're going to do is hire 3 people. I was like, what do you mean? I just hired you. I was like, wasn't sure if I can afford this. And she goes, you can't afford not to.
That's exactly right.
Right.
Yes.
And,
yes.
It's funny because Rachel, I had come from running a major business, running a 7-figure company and this, that, and the other thing, but everything was so smooth. And I was so truly much more emotionally invested in Slater's success than I ever was in my printing company. You know,
Mhm.
that this was, you know, that it just was, and it can stop us. And until you pull yourself out of that, and then you start taking actions. And I just started looking at things through like my quote unquote my old eyes of saying, well, if I was still running my printing company, I would have hired this already.
Yeah.
And so it's great insight. So tell us, you know, okay, so then you've scaled this business, you uh, are you know, helping other businesses. What married, has have a young baby now. What drives you to write a book? Because I've written a few books and I'm writing another, and it's a little time consuming.
Yeah, that's for sure. I am a person who I think because I'm so driven by anxiety, I like to be very prepared for every possible outcome, as we all do, right? But when the pandemic happened, and I was 9 months pregnant, all of a sudden I laid off 48 people, closed 4 locations. And, this was March 15, and March 24, I had my son.
Oh wow.
So it was like all of a sudden, all of the things that helped me feel very secure, not all, right? I have a wonderful husband, thankfully, and we're very solid, but many of the things that helped me feel very secure, it was like the rug got pulled out from under me. All of a sudden, the business, we had just opened the 4th location a few months before, and the business, we had never closed. We had maybe like one snowstorm a few years ago where we're like, all right, let's just close up shop early because it's crazy. But we had never closed like that. And to have so many people counting on me for income, it was a lot of pressure. It was a lot of fear, crazy timing with the baby. And, I was closed for 5 months because New York City, we're a massage therapy business. We were mandated to be closed. And I took that time to sort of try to recalibrate, to think about, look, if I'm freaking out, I'm not going to be in a good headspace. And if I'm not in a good headspace, I don't have access to the best resources in my mind. I don't have access to my resilience, my resourcefulness, and things like that. Because, when it's like if you run into the doctor and you're like, oh my God, I broke my arm, and the doctor's freaking out, like that's not helpful. You need to put someone in charge to say, here's what we're going to do. And for me, for a little while, I kind of called it firing myself. I was like, you know what? I'm not in the right headspace for this. I'm hormonal. I have a baby who's up all night every night, and I'm figuring all this crazy stuff out. I'm going to fire myself for a few weeks, just give it a minute. And, when the dust settled and the baby started sleeping through the night, which is really sleep training is
Huge,
the best.
huge. Oh,
Sleep
sleep
training,
training.
game changer. So when the baby started sleeping, and had more consistent naps as well, I realized every time he took a nap, I was journaling, I was writing, and I just wanted to feel like there was one thing that I was in control over. And, they say whenever you're going through something, find someone else who's suffering and help them.
Right.
And I think that that's really true because, as I was talking to my consulting clients who were also picking up the pieces, I was listening to myself give advice and being like, you know what, I need this advice too, frankly. And so, I was writing every time he took a nap, and I started structuring it, and it became this book, which is Massage
Woo!
MBA. This is an author's copy, so it has that ugly sticker on it, but it's Massage MBA, and it's basically just how I got my practice started, what worked for me, how we picked ourselves up after COVID, how we diversified revenue streams, how we maximized our sales channels, what marketing looks like. And, the questions that I ask during a regular strategy session that I would do with a consulting client, or even with my all team when we do our Monday stand-up meeting, I think about, what does your client need? What are they going to need? And what do they need now? And that answer has changed with COVID.
Yeah.
Before, where I would say our client needs to feel like they're, just so relaxed and enjoying themselves in their body, that hasn't changed. But now they also need to understand that we're doing things differently and we're being much safer. And, the way that you communicate your services has to change to meet your audience's needs. And that can change over time, especially with something like COVID.
Right. And I think it's, you know, it brings us top of mind is, you know, sales 101 is know what your client's pain points are.
Mhm.
And right now, everybody's concern is safety and cleanliness. I'd really like to do this. Am I going to be safe? Is it a responsible thing to do right now? And so it's meeting your clients where they are. And it's not about you building your business your way. It's about meeting your clients where they are. And that gives you the ability to scale.
Exactly. And I can't tell you how many folks, they're doing the right things, right? Like they got the in-room purifier or they got, all of the sanitation things they needed, but they don't mention it on their website. And it's like, they're not talking about it in their social media, or they're not communicating effectively to their client the thing that makes them different, and I think a lot also about, if you stopped offering your services tomorrow, what would people miss the most about you? And how we really should lead with that, because that's the thing that makes us unique. I think when you ask people like, why is your business different from someone else's, people have a hard time like figuring that out for themselves. But if you think about what people would miss about working with you, I think it gets to the heart of what makes your business so different.
So if you had one baby tip, because there's a ton of them, I know, um, what is one thing you'd share with our listeners on navigating these challenging times and seeing things as opportunities to grow?
I would say, you know, if you can start to take a look, it's hard to make plans, right, when we don't know what the future is. But if you can start to take a look at what you'd like to happen and just make any small progress towards that spot, consider opportunities. Consider, even if you're not in a position to purchase a business, there's lots of unconventional ways to acquire a business. Like there's owner financing, there's opportunities out there in the market in all kinds of different places that you wouldn't necessarily imagine. There's a big shift up. There's people looking for work. There's places that are becoming available. There's market share to be had. There's places closing. With so much turnover and so much tumultuousness, there's got to be good things. Like there's got to be opportunities in there that are, ripe for taking advantage of.
So what's new and exciting for Rachel and you coming into 2021?
I think the biggest thing I am excited about, actually, it's the social media platform called Clubhouse, which is so random, but I think, new opportunities to meet people, to speak with people, now that we're not really traveling because of COVID, there's lots of media opportunities right from your own bedroom, which is just wild. And I think for me, I'm looking at specifically how I can connect with people who, are doing interesting things, and how I can connect with my audience in different kinds of ways.
I love that. Rachel, how can our listeners know more about you?
Sure. My website is called wellnessbusinessconsulting.com. And I'm also on Instagram at Rachel Beider, and that's RachelBeider.
And so the new book, tell us a little bit about it and where we can get it.
Sure. Massage MBA is on Amazon. It's on Kindle and paperback, and it was just released. So it's available on Amazon. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Listeners, if you're a regular, you know my routine. For those new listeners just tuning in, here's the deal. Hit subscribe. We come into your inbox with interviews just as good as today's with Rachel's and many other fabulous guests every Monday morning. Leave us a note. What impacted you about listening to Rachel today, and what are you going to do about it? I don't just want the takeaways, I want the actions. That's how we support the community here at Her Success Story. Rachel, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.